Hey guys, Bike here, and I'm back again with another Last Epoch build guide video. This one is for the Primalist. This is Tornado Werebear Druid. All gameplay was taken at Corruption 750. Thank you very much. I found that the build was pretty fun. I took this build straight from level 1 all the way to level 98. That's where I'm at right now. I use Dread's leveling guide. If you're interested in more of a leveling guide, this is going to be definitely more of an in-game focus. I don't really go over the leveling process. So if you want a leveling guide, in the description down below, there is a link to Dread's leveling guide. Since I referenced that, I'm just going to give all credit to Dread. Dread, thank you very much for the leveling guide. I checked it out. I advise that you go check that out. And then if you want more in-game ideas, you can come back here and check this out. I figured I'd save you all some time. Also, in the description down below, you will find a link to a loot filter that I created for this build, as well as a loot filter guide, just on how I like to do my loot filters, as well as a link to my planner with all the items and everything I'm going to discuss in this video. So, with all that being said, I really enjoyed the build. It was a really great time to play it all the way from level 1 to 100. I had to make a few little twinks there. You can't just immediately go into Tornado and level up, but Dread's guide covers all of that, so I'm going to leave that there. You guys can go check that out. I'm going to focus more on the in-game options here. So, especially after getting to Monoliths, the build really starts to come online. The whole idea is you get all these tornadoes, you dip into the Shaman class, you start spamming out all these tornadoes, you burn down all your mana, and then boom, you transform into Werebear, you get all your mana back because it gets converted to Rage, and then everything gets smoked, so to speak, because you get all these damage increases and damage boosts with while in Werebear form, while you're transformed, that sort of thing. So for the most part, it was pretty fast. It was pretty speedy. As you can see in the gameplay down below, like, I'm moving pretty fast. We're using a raw warp. We got a good amount of movement speed on. I'm also using what's the name of that ring? It's the purple ring. Oh, this is gonna bother me. Let me see if I can look it up. Flames of Midnight. Yeah, we're using a Flames of Midnight. That also gives us increased movement speed. All of that works together, especially if you're using a raw and warp. And yeah, the build is speedy. It's kind of cool. It kind of feels like, sometimes you're playing the Hulk, you're like, bam, 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 transform, type thing. And everything just gets decimated. So I'm sure you're curious, how does it do against bosses? Because obviously we're here clearing through just regular monoliths like it's nothing. Well, here's the timeline bosses at 750 corruption. And the astute eye might notice that my health total has gone down a little bit. It's because I noticed I had some idols that weren't working out too well for me while I shot the footage of the monolith. So I changed out a couple idols, and it changed my health just a little bit. Anyway, playing against the bosses, it went pretty well. They do a lot of damage. The build is a little bit squishy. There are ways to deal with this, and I'll go over those options in the guild. But for the guild, welcome to the guild. I'll go over those options in the build, but for the most part, it clears through this type of content very quick. This is a great farming build. This is a great farmer. Going on over to regular Aberoth, same thing. We kind of just Shrek'd right through him. Absolutely. We're able to Shrek through him, through his lackeys, all of that. He still does some damage, but for the most part, you can handle this guy just fine. Let's talk about Uber Aberoth. Can this build do Uber Aberoth? Yes, but not in this current form. I had some people share with me gameplay of their version of Tornado Werebear, which is a little bit different, and it looks pretty strong. It doesn't use this exact setup that I have going on down below, but it looks like it could do a really good job. It also looks like it takes a little bit of investment, and I was just more interested in farming. So as you can see in the gameplay, in case I didn't make it apparent, we switched from regular Aberoth to Uber Aberoth, and it's Dying Simulator. So it can do the job, but with this current setup, this current gear, no, not really. I'm sure there's information out there, but I wasn't going to take it that far. So with all that being said, guys, I've already told you that all that information is available in the description down below. If you don't mind, leave a like, possibly subscribe if you like what I do here, and let's jump into the game. Let's go. All right, here we are in game. So let me give you a brief breakdown of what you can expect from this build guide. So right now we're going to go over, in just a moment, we're going to go over a demonstration, like how the build works, some tips and tricks, that sort of thing. Then we're going to go into the gear. That's typically the longest section because I like to go over alternatives. Then we're going to go over idols, blessings, skills, passive tree, and we get out of here. So with all that being said, let's begin with a normal skill rotation. It's pretty simple. So this Fury Leap is unspec'd, right? It's just on the bar because we don't need to have Gathering Storm on our bar. It gets cast for us by Tornado. So essentially, you're running around, you're pretty speedy, you're like the Flash, right? And here's an enemy that you want to kill. Jump towards them, just dump the tornadoes, maybe, move around if you need to. Burn all your mana and boom, transform. Hit them a couple times with swipe, right? Because now you're in bear form, so you can swipe. And yeah, you do a decent amount of damage. Transform back. You gain like all sorts of nice little damage bonuses, and then transform again and go. Right? And then you have your war cry for extra survivability. I put swipe on the hot bar just so you can try and keep some buffs up if you want to without going into Werebear form. That's essentially it. You just spam a bunch of tornadoes and transform into a bear. That's about it. So let's go ahead and jump into the gear. All right. So let's start with the weapons. So I'm using a Ron Warp. I got a 2LP. Cast speed is king. And the way Ron Warp, in case you're not aware, Ron Warp really benefits from movement speed. So the higher movement speed you have, the more damage you'll be doing. And we have a chance to proc haste on hit. Let me just show you real quick what it would look like if we had haste. It gives us 30% movement speed. Shadow Worlds is a great fill-in. We'll go over this section here in a little bit. But if you have haste active, which you have a chance to proc haste with Ron Warp, you get 30% more movement speed, which means more damage. So the more damage you have, the more movement speed you have, you gain 3% increased spell damage per 1% increased movement speed. 130% increased movement speed. That's a lot of damage. That's a lot of nuts. Compound fans out there. So anyway, that is the basics of the Ron Warp. We don't really use a lot of other stuff that you get from here. We don't use the Chrono Warp because we don't have teleport or transplant. And so none of that works. The only thing we're benefiting from right now is the chance to gain haste on hit and 3% increased spell damage per 1% increased movement speed. When we have haste, we have 130% movement speed. So we'll put that back right there. So that is Ron Warp. And we're using a Tempest Maw. It gives us Lightning Pen. It gives us some melee damage, which I'll go over later in the skill section, why that's important. You're looking for critical strike chance, critical strike multiplier, and if you can swing it, chance to shred armor on hit. But I would prioritize increased critical strike chance and multiplier on this weapon first, because you can pick up armor shred. Oh, I don't have it on me right now. You can pick up armor shred on your gloves, and if you're not using something like a nihilist, you can pick it up on your neck. So there's ways to get armor shred that are outside of your weapon. That's why I say prioritize getting critical strike multiplier and crit chance, and then get armor shred if you can, which I was able to swing it here. You also get a lot of great things with Tempest Maw. You get spell damage, lightning damage again, strength and attunement, so on and so forth. Very nice. Helmet, Raptor Helm. I recommend Raptor Helm. I mean, I know there's a lot of great bases out there, but the reason why I recommend Raptor Helm is the critical strike chance, the base critical strike chance that you get there. You get the armor, and then you see that 3% critical strike chance. With all this crit strike chance increases that we get through our skills and through our gear, having a 3% base to add to everything is great. If you don't have one of these helms, or if you don't have a Tempest Maw in general, Another great backup would be the Eagle Wing, right? It would be this, maybe not these rolls, but it would be this kind of weapon, right? It gives up to a 4% increased critical strike chance. So this could be a great backup to have on hand. Or you could also use something like a Shattered Worlds. We'll talk about more when we get to the relic section. But yeah, if you don't want to use a Raptor helm, and assuming you don't like Tempest Maw or you don't have one and you have an Eagle Wing on hand, use this and then you can remove this for something else. Nihilus is a great pickup if you have a good roll. You get a lot of increased health, increased mana. Go for critical strike multiplier, +2 to all skills, mana regen, armor, + to all resistances. It is a great pickup if you can make it work. You could also use an Omnis or probably just a Bone Amulet with some good rolls on there to try and make up for some of that. As you can tell, like, most of my stuff is pretty good, but then when you get to the Primalist specific stuff, not as good, because I've been playing Sentinel all season, right? So this is whatever, right? This is acceptable. This is not the greatest either. I literally have a tier 2 affix on there, but for the most part, 3 out of 4 ain't bad. A Maruna may or may not be the best in slot. You can honestly, if you have the resistances, you can go for a Null Portent. Right? You can go for a Null Portent if you have the resistances. If you want to run like a double Red Ring, Nihilus, that sort of thing, and then devote resistances to everything right here in your idle slot, you could probably pull off a Null Portent and be just fine. But I found a Maruna to be quite nice. You get all that armor. Strength is really important. I didn't mention it, but strength and health is very important right here. And right here, they go a long way. So yeah, absolutely go for that. Let's talk about this belt. It got added here in Season 2. It's called Epoch's Innovation. It gives a decent amount of critical strike multiplier, crit chance, that sort of thing. It's fine. The thing is, it's also pretty easy to get 2 LP, even 3 LP, and it's one of my favorite belt types in the game. It is a spider silk belt, so you get a lot of poison and cold resistance out of it. So I was able to slam health, cleanse, very important, and increase cooldown recovery on this thing. This is a great pickup. Try and get yourself an Eloco's if you don't have one. Otherwise, you can use any sort of belt, Brewmaster's Buckle, or a regular Spider Silk belt, that sort of thing. Yeah, you can go for that. Flames of Midnight. You might be wondering, why do I have intelligence? Why do I have intelligence slammed on here? All in due time. All in due time. For those who have played with similar item setups, you already know. So, intelligence and health, Flames of Midnight, the main reason why we're using this is our evade is replaced by Spirit Step, and because of that, we now have swiftness, right? Swiftness gives us increased movement speed. If I take it off, we go down to 80% movement speed. So, Flames of Midnight definitely helps with that. Like I said, Flames of Midnight on gives us more damage for Ron Warp, or Ron Warp gives us more damage based off our movement speed, that sort of thing. Yeah. Red Ring, I was at one point running double Red Ring. That's why my resistances are not completely maxed. If I put them on, I'm cool. Double Red Ring could work in this situation. I personally needed the intelligence roll. All right, I needed the intelligence roll. And so if you're not running a Usinis, then you probably would be fine with double Red Ring slammed with strength. Not everybody has a Red Ring or a Flames of Midnight laying around. Well, this is a bit easier to get. So if you don't have Red Rings laying around, just use any ring that you want. Use any ring that you want. I don't think stacking Flames of Midnight helps at all. So if you don't have a red ring, try just a regular purple ring, right? You can go for any sort of exalted ring in the game. Take your pick. You can go for a copper ring. You could also go for a silver ring for more movement speed, that sort of thing. You can go for that. I just found Red Rain to be pretty comfy. Plus, I had a couple sitting around with LP, so I was able to slam it with 16. Prioritize getting the T7 strength on there. That's about it, right? That's about it. So that covers the reins. Best in slot, pair of gloves might be, well, honestly, ultra best in slot would be the Immortal Vice, but there's a reason why I didn't use this. And it's the same reason why I'm not using Shadow Worlds as well for this build guide. And the reason why I'm not using this is, for the most part, most people don't have an Immortal Vice or a Shadow Worlds laying around. So I wanted to use item like Red Rain. I budged on that because I feel like more people have gotten it's farmable technically, right? It's farmable technically, but Immortal Vice and Shadow Worlds requires you to actually take on a very difficult fight to try and defeat the opponent and then get something that is usable. Whereas Red Rain, you could get lucky. You could do a bunch of prophecies. Good luck buying one on the market. But this is, in my opinion, I feel like Red Rain is more doable than Immortal Vice and Shadow Worlds. I could be wrong about that. If I am, sound off in the comments down below. So with that being said, this being best in slot, why am I using Arcane Bracers? Well, best in slot beyond this would most likely be Eternal Gauntlets. The thing is, I don't really have a good pair of Eternal Gauntlets set up. I mean, I have this one. This one's fine. But I had this and it just worked out for me for the most part. You know, I had to be level 80 to use them, but it was a lot of health, strength, cast speed. It had everything I needed. So I just used these Arcane Bracers. I think if I wanted to push this past 1,000 corruption, we would have to switch over to Eternal Gauntlets. We're going to need that extra armor. We're also going to need that armor mitigation applying to damage over time. But yeah, this worked out for me. Might be one of the weaker parts of the build. This might be better for us, but nonetheless, we can go for that. Blood of the Exile boots. I would say this is probably your best in slot for just the sheer amount of movement speed. You slam this with T7 movement speed. Look, if you get one with, well, it's always going to come with 30% increased movement speed. So if you can get 10% increase, that's 40% movement speed. Slam it with 30. That's 70% movement speed off a pair of boots. On top of that, you get strength, dexterity, intelligence. Really good for feeding the Red Ring. I'm assuming everybody knows about this, but if you didn't know, Red Ring gives you 10% less damage taken if your total attributes are at least 180. We're at least 180. So, are we at least 180? Hold, please. And welcome back. Yeah, we're at exactly 200. That scared me for a second. That scared me for a second. So, yeah. So we get 10% damage reduction. If you run 2 of these, that's another 10% damage reduction, 20% damage reduction, that sort of thing. All right. So I've been building up to a Ursini's Sphere. And the main reason why my intelligence and my attunement are exactly the same. Why? Well, with Ursini's, whenever you cast lightning damage, right? We're doing lightning damage with this. You see those little orbs that kind of go flying out, right? They don't happen often. That's being procced by the Ursini's Sphere whenever we hit with lightning damage, right? You see those going out? They don't have to actually hit anything, but every time we cast a water orb, we gain 30% increased lightning damage. Now, whenever you hit a boss or rare enemy, you have a 100% chance to cast a water orb. But if your attunement and your intelligence are the same, you cast 3 water orbs. Then it goes on a 3-second cooldown. These last for 12 seconds. So it'll take you 12 seconds to build up to your max. So if you're casting 3 every 3 seconds, right? Lasts up to 12 seconds. That is a ton. That is a ton of increased lightning damage. It's still good even if your attunement and your intelligence are not the same, but I would say it's more worth it, in my opinion, if that's even a word. Well, it is a word. Is that correct grammar? Who cares? Anyway, I think it's worth it to try and get 3 water orbs being cast at the same time, because that's 90% increased lightning damage every 3 seconds. That stacks for a total of 12 seconds. That, like, your damage really ramps that point. So let's talk about some other things that you could use if you don't want to use something like this. You know, not everybody's going to have a 4 LP. A 2 LP is just fine. Get critical strike multiplier on there and maybe health, and you're good. All right, let's talk about stuff that might work if you don't want to do this. Stormcarved Testament is also a great pickup. Highly recommend it. Critical strike multiplier and health. I think I used the same base. Yeah, I think I used the same relic when I slammed this, except I got everything I needed on this one. So Stormcarved Testament, it's great. You get a lot of lightning pin, you get shock chance, lightning resistance, mana, physical resistance. This is a great pickup. I think Stormcarved Testament is a great relic to use. If you don't have one, you don't have a great one, you don't want to use this, you don't want to try and get your intelligence and attunement the same, pick yourself up a Stormcarved Testament. You could go the Twisted Heart route. All right, this is interesting. Let me show you. What people recommended to me trying was using a Mad Alchemist Ladle and then a Cleaver Solution, right? Because we get the critical strike multiplier, critical strike chance if you get it on there, but also your intelligence becomes your strength. So 129 strength, 129 intelligence. That pretty much, I'm not going to say it nerfs this, but this kind of loses its value. But people also recommended using something like a Twisted Heart and then just going to town on this thing, right? The thing is, when you transform, you're no longer generating ward anymore. That's fine to me, but you're also sacrificing some of your own health to try and maintain this ward. And ultimately, I found that the damage wasn't as high. I didn't think the utility was as cool as it sounded. So personally, I didn't go this direction, but I wanted to point it out because this is something that people offer to me. You could also, you know, maybe not use a Mad Alchemist Ladle. Maybe you go with Ron Warp and Cleaver Solution. That is a possibility as well that you could use. I found it was whatever, if I'm being perfectly honest. And maybe you don't even go with something like a Twisted Heart. Maybe you go with like a Shattered Worlds. I mean, this definitely works. I personally just preferred Tempest Maw. But if you wanted to have that extra intelligence, like, yeah, this could be a possibility for you. So I figured that I would point it out there for you. Figured I'd point it out, but ultimately I recommend Usinis and Tempest Maw and Ron Warp. All right, with all that being said, that is the gear. Let's go ahead and talk about the idols. This is going to be pretty brief. Pretty much anything to get my resistances up, and then try and get yourself one idol with critical strike avoidance. All right, that is the idol section. That is essentially it. Now, if you are able to take care of your resistances elsewhere, you can play around with the idols. I didn't get that far, right? Because I didn't really have any Primalist idols laying around. I didn't really enjoy, well, I didn't have a lot of Primalist idols laying around, and I didn't have a lot of good gear to support my resistances. So that's all what my idols became. It was just resistance stacking. There's nothing very interesting about it. This is the only Primalist idol that I really sought after, was the critical strike avoidance one. So yeah, try and get yourself a critical strike avoidance one. Let's talk about the blessings. So we could talk about, we could use that layout, but I prefer this. All right, so pick up the experience blessing, and I went for the rain blessing for, you know, red rains. I didn't even bother grabbing these blessings over here. They're item drop blessings. Take whatever you want. Same for this one, right? It's a lot different leveling an alt than it is just your first character. In the Black Sun timeline, I went for spell damage leeches health. You could go for critical strike multiplier. I think spell damage leeches health is very good. In this timeline, I just went for the I think I did this timeline in regulars, but I didn't do a single I didn't do a single run in Empowered's and the ending the storm timeline. I just used the feature where, you know, I was found on a different character and I took this blessing, but the increased health regen blessing goes a long way. The Reign of Dragons, I took the critical strike avoidance blessing to go hand in hand with this idol, and I think that's good. That way we have 100% critical strike avoidance. Oh, oops. And then Spirits of Fire, we went with the endurance blessing. And then we took the armor blessing. I didn't even do a single one here. This is still the minimum value. So, yeah, I think this is a pretty good setup. Let's go ahead and talk about the skills. So I already told you guys the premise here. The premise is we're doing a lot of damage with Gathering Storm, and we're proccing it with Tornado, and then everything else kind of supports it. So with Gathering Storm, the main nodes you're going to want to be looking for is Concentrated Storm. This allows you to do more damage and cast more Storm Bolts. That's how we're doing the damage. You want to come down here and grab some of this stuff like Storm Bolt repeat chance is very good. Range Storm Bolt with the staff. It's whatever. We're trying to get down to here. Storm Bolts target enemies further away. This is also a great pickup right here. Gathering Storm penetrates enemy lightning resistance a little bit more. Now, it's saying Gathering Storm. I don't know if this node also applies to the Storm Bolts that are being procced, but it's worth a pickup in my opinion. Up here, Jolting Strikes, Storm Bolt shock chance. Basically, you hit an enemy with a Storm Bolt, you have a greater chance to shock them, in this case 100%. And then this one, Tempest Weapon. I kept mentioning it over and over again. Spell damage per melee damage. Gathering Storm deals additional spell damage per 3 melee damage equipped on your equipped axe or mace. So essentially, the more melee damage, you know, and it could be melee lightning or just generic melee, you know, any sort of melee damage, that all gets converted into lightning damage, lightning spell damage for Gathering Storm. Tempest Maw already gives us spell lightning damage, but also gives us a good source of regular melee lightning damage and melee damage. I think that's why this is a great pickup. Now, Cleaver's Solution, I'm pretty sure that 50 physical damage, melee physical, it doesn't say it has to be melee lightning damage. It just says melee damage gets converted. So I think with Cleaver's Solution, that melee physical damage also gets converted, but there's just more damage here, as well as flat out lightning pin and stats like strength and attunement on Tempest Maw. There we go. So that's what you're going to want to be looking out for here on Gathering Storm. Under Werebear, this is a great node, Invigoration, to pick up. Coming down here, Insatiable, you get increased global crit chance while you're in Werebear form. You also are going to want to pick up these two nodes right here. Spell damage per strength, right? So you saw me stacking all this strength. Whenever we're in Werebear form, all of our strength gives us a flat 110 spell damage. It doesn't get converted. It just also gives us. We gain spell damage per point of strength. This, we're not using Maelstrom, so this doesn't really do anything for us. Relentless Thunder. This is a great pickup. Whenever we are in Werebear form, we deal 60% more lightning damage for 6 seconds. Excuse me. So that's what you're going to want to be focusing on Werebear form. For Tornado, what you're going to want to be focusing on is this node. Tornado casts Stormbolt more frequently. And this node, when you use Tornado, you have a chance to create an additional tornado. Right? We lose all the pool strength. Who cares about that? We're trying to spawn as many tornadoes as possible and get them to cast as many storm bolts as possible. I like the tornadoes to last a little bit longer. Overcast Skies is also not too bad with the targeting enemies further away. These are also good pickups, you know, better mana efficiency with Tornado, as well as Aspect of the Storm. It's cool to put 1 point in here because when we gain this buff from casting Tornado, we gain 10% increase movement speed, right? So that feeds our Realm Warp. But we also gain a little bit of attack speed and cast speed with this buff while this is active, right? So this is a good pickup for Tornado. Go over here to Warcry. So the way I'm playing it, we come up here, we grab the increased crit chance. We come over here, we gain chill chance, right? While under the effects of Warcry, as well as 100% increased critical strike chance. So we also pick this up over here too. You know, the 75% increased crit chance and the Bringer of Winter increased crit chance. 175% increased crit whenever we use Warcry. We come, we reduce the cooldown of Warcry to 5 seconds total. We also create a totem on the ground, which also helps cast Warcry for us. And then we use Apprehend to now pull enemies back towards us. We come down here, we get Frenzy. And on hit, whenever we're under the effects of Warcry. And then if you come down here, grab Cleansing Ailments. This is another great pickup. But the things that you should focus on are this side, definitely this, and then if you can afford it, this and this. All right, swipe is pretty simple. So the way we're using swipe, and I'll probably demonstrate a little bit more, we're trying to get Aspect of the Panther stacks. So we get a total of 5 plus 2 stacks for a total of 7. And while we have Aspect of the Panther, we gain global attack speed and cast speed. Does not scale with stacks, so we just gain 12% cast speed and attack speed while we have at least 1 stack of Aspect of the Panther. Then we want 5 points into Sabertooth's Endurance, increases the duration of Aspect of the Panther. And then this is the big selling point right here. Twin Fanes. Whenever we're dual wielding, per stack of Aspect of the Panther, which is 7, we gain 12% global critical strike multiplier, but if we're dual wielding, it is double. It is 24% global critical strike multiplier. Now, I'm not a mathematician. You might be, but let me do the math real quick. 24 times 7 is 168% increase global critical strike multiplier. So let me see if I can show you. I'm going to move my face here. What's up, guys? Come over here. While we're attacking, look. Critical strike multiplier with my current setup goes up to 622%. So let's go ahead and start, spamming all this stuff. Try and keep our swipe stacks up, right? It's a bit of a buff, but then when we transform over into Werebear, we now get to maintain that. So that is a lot of critical strike multiplier. Let me move my face back over here. So yeah, that to me, that's the main selling point. So I will admit, trying to maintain this buff can be a little annoying. That's why I typically just dump as many tornadoes as I can get off and then transform and then start proc and swipe this way. It's cool if you can already have it active. That way, when you transform, the full amount of damage is already going. But that's really annoying to try and maintain those stacks. That's why I just say dump all the tornadoes, transform, start, hitting with swipe in Werebear form, and then worry about it later. All right. So that is all the skills. Let's go ahead and talk about the passive tree. All right. You're going to want 8 points in Natural Attunement, 6 points in Wisdom of the Wind, 1 point in Harmony of Blades, so we can do a wield, and 5 points in Hunter Restoration. Now, you might be tempted to grab this. This is fine, but ultimately, I think this is the setup that you're going to want to go for. This is Dread's setup. I just followed what he did. Cornered Beast, I haven't experimented with it. The thing about the less damage taken on low health is it doesn't kick in like Endurance does, right? It doesn't... So, let me try and explain Endurance really quick. If you take a hit that reduces you below your endurance threshold, the moment you hit that endurance threshold, your endurance damage reduction kicks in immediately, no matter what. Even if it's the same hit, it'll start reducing that damage. It calculates it. The Cornered Beast damage reduction doesn't kick in till the next hit you take while at low health. So this could save you hypothetically, but that's only if you're already at low health. That's why you typically see people who are playing low life builds taking something like Cornered Beast. I don't think it's potentially as useful, but you could experiment with it if you want. All right, come over here. So I'm not going in any particular order. I would say the way I did it is I went from Primalist immediately into Shaman, and I put 5 points into Shamanic Infusion to get Tornado. Because it's kind of like the build, right? Put 5 points here, get Tornado, and then you can start going elsewhere, right? I think what I did is I kind of put points into Druid as I was leveling, and then I came back later and I put 10 points into Beastmaster. We're not trying to get Summon Bear or anything. We just put 10 points in. You're right. We get Earth Sign Strength, which is a damage reduction. Also gives us strength. And then 2 points into Boarheart, which is an aspect of which has us get aspect of the boar, which is a damage reduction. Unfortunately, we can't get Porcine Constitution anymore. They made this Beastmaster only, and I think that's great. So invest points into Druid, continue outward, and then finish out with Shaman once you get to the end over here. So we do 5 points in Primordial Resonance, 4 points in Chitinous Plating. I added the Chitinous Plating part. I needed Endurance, right? So if you don't need Endurance, don't put it here, put it elsewhere. So 5 points into Primordial Resonance, 7 points into Druidic Prowess for Strength of Attunement, 3 points into Focus Wrath, 5 points into Wind in the Leaves, 5 points into Bushstalker for crit chance as well as Health Leech on crit. Could be useful. 8 points in Aspect of Might, which also gives us a nice amount of... which gives us a nice amount of... we get increased armor while we're in human form, but also it gives us strength. We get increased melee damage while in Werebear form. That's whatever, but... increase armor per strength in human form. That is great. I forgot to turn that off. So Jarrett, you are now featured on this YouTube video. Thank you so much for subscribing over on YouTube. So aspects of might, you want the 8 points there. 5 points into Primal Shifter. This is very important, all right? This is the main reason why you want to transform into Werebear, but not just sit there. Transform, then transform back, because it only lasts 10 seconds. While you transform, you get the shapeshifter bonus. Last 10 seconds, we get 50% increased armor, 50% damage. All right, this is a huge bonus. On top of that, we get 75% crit chance and 50% critical strike multiplier for 10 seconds. So it's very important to not just sit in one form for too long if you're trying to do a lot of damage. Transform, bam, 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 bam. There you go. There's the shifter bonus, right? Hit, transform, back. We now got the shifter bonus again, right? Hit, transform, bam, 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 that sort of thing. That's what you're going to want to do with the rinse and repeat, right? So this is a very strong bonus right here. I don't really dip into reincarnation. 8 points into Rageborn for increased crit chance and rage gain on crit. That is fine. And then 10 points into Hideskin for health and maximum health gain as endurance threshold. You could put points into Impervious. This only activates when you're hitting with a melee attack. It's a form of damage reduction. I put 2 points in there. You can put all the way up to 5. Feel free to experiment with it. And that is the build, guys. That's the build. Thank you very much. Shout out to Dread. Thank you for coming up with this build. Being a progenitor of Tornado Werebear. Very excited. Hopefully it survives into Season 3, and we shall see what happens. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for making it to the end of the video. Possibly leave a like. Possibly subscribe if you like what I do here. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.